It's as hard to break a record if no one's around to measure the thing you're trying to break. In 1977, glass engineers in East Germany made an unbreakable glass. The stuff is so tough it can reportedly withstand gunshots and hammer blows. It can boil water without shattering, and it won't break if you drop it on tile. And we know this because they tested it twice. One glass in particular has survived for decades worth of hammers, acid baths, bullets, and even fire. And somehow it's still going strong. But how do we know that this glass is actually unbreakable? Because it's been independently tested. In 2018, the Smithsonian put one of these glasses through a series of tests and documented the results. They dropped it, hit it with a hammer, and then set it on fire. Throughout all of this, the glass held up remarkably well, only getting slightly singed, earning it the title of the world's strongest glass. This type of glass is called superfest. The word itself means super tough in German, and that pretty much sums it up. It's 5 times tougher than tempered glass, the kind that's used in car windows, and is about 15 times stronger than regular old window glass. Now, the superfest process was patented in 1979 by a company called the VEB Glaswerk Südwestfalen, or simply the South Westphalia Glaswerks. This company was based in the town of Schwedt, in the state of East Berlin. And it's here that we discover the first piece of this mystery, because today the town of Schwedt doesn't exist. In fact, it hasn't existed for over 30 years now. The area where the glassworks was located sits just north of modern-day Berlin, and was part of East Germany until the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. After reunification, the area became part of the state of Brandenburg, which probably explains why there's so little trace of this company left behind. I mean, aside from the few documents that mention them, the only remaining evidence of their existence is a single factory building that's now occupied by a paint company. There's literally no sign that this place ever existed. Aside from the one glass that they left behind, the rest of the story is hidden somewhere between the cracks of history. But before we get into that, let's take a minute to talk about the glass itself, because it's really incredible stuff. The idea behind superglass was twofold. On one hand, it was intended to be a cheap and durable replacement for plates, cups, and other tableware. But on the other, it was also meant to be a way to save money on raw materials. You see, after World War II, Germany found itself in a bit of a glass shortage. Most of the glass factories were in the West, and the East had very little access to them. So when the Soviets pulled out of East Germany in the late 1940s, they took most of the glass-making technology with them. This included skilled glassmakers, factory equipment, and technical expertise. With this sudden brain drain, East Germany found themselves with a lot fewer glasses and a lot more problems. Officials knew that they needed to find a way to replace the imported glassware that everyone relied on, but they also knew that they didn't have the resources to simply rebuild what had been lost. So instead, they focused their efforts on improving the quality of existing materials and manufacturing processes. This wasn't just some make-do-and-mend situation either. It was a serious effort to make something better. For example, instead of importing new glassmaking technology, they turned to their own scientists and engineers to find ways to improve things. As a result, they developed new types of glass that could be made with cheaper materials and lower-tech equipment. There was only one issue. While their new glass was cheap and easy to produce, it wasn't exactly high quality. East German glass wasn't nearly as clear or as durable as West German glass, so it didn't look good or keep its shape under pressure. But the government wanted to find a solution. Not only would it help the average person eat their breakfast, but it would also help them earn valuable foreign currency on the international market. You see, East Germany wasn't just cut off from fancy imported goods. They were also cut off from most international trade. The only way they could really interact with the outside world was through international companies who were looking to buy their goods, and they did this through something called the Intershop, basically a government-run catalog store where you could order just about anything from cameras to cars. Because they were cut off from most of Europe, East Germany had to build everything themselves, including things like cars and cameras, and in many cases, they actually did a pretty good job. But their biggest export was glassware. Between 1961 and 1989, East Germany exported over 50 million tons of glassware to Western markets, bringing in about $5 billion. And with the average price of glass being around 10 cents per pound, that means that East Germany sold about £500 million of glass during this time period, worth about $25 billion in today's money. That's a huge amount of glass. And all of that glass came from the same 3 factories that were built during the war. But while these factories were able to meet quotas, the quality of their products never quite met international standards. Most European glassware was made with silica sand, lead oxide, and soda ash. Silica gives the glass its structure, lead makes it clear and shiny, and soda ash lowers the melting point, so it is easier to work with. But that isn't the only way to make glass. There are plenty of other materials that can be used, like boron nitride, aluminum oxide, and titanium dioxide. And while they might not be as clear or shiny, they're often much harder and more durable. In fact, some of these glasses can be made into synthetic gemstones that are virtually impossible to tell apart from the real thing. And this brings us back to Superfest. Instead of using traditional ingredients, East German engineers used boron nitride and aluminum oxide to create a glass that was stronger than regular glass. But despite its incredible strength, it had one major drawback. It couldn't be recycled. So once it was used, it was done forever. And this was a big problem because their entire economy was based on selling glass to the West. So when the government asked the people at the glassworks to make something stronger, they knew that they had to make a compromise. Ultimately, they came up with a process that allowed them to coat the inside of the glass with aluminum oxide, giving it the durability that they needed without sacrificing the clarity that consumers wanted. This involved mixing boric acid and aluminum oxide powder together and then melting it down into a liquid. Then they poured that liquid onto a sheet of molten glass and let gravity do the rest. This coating gave the glass its strength, but it also made it incredibly difficult to work with. The glass was so thick that it took 4 times as long to cut as regular glass, and it was so hard that standard glassblowing tools just weren't up to the task. To make matters worse, the surface was extremely rough, which made it almost impossible to polish without chipping or cracking the glass. These issues plagued the company for years, but they eventually figured out how to overcome them. By the mid-1980s, they'd figured out how to machine the glass with diamond-tipped tools, and by 1989, they'd mastered the art of mass-producing Superfest glasses. But sadly, it didn't last for long. Just 2 years later, the company was shut down and everything was scrapped. But luckily, before that happened, they managed to produce a few thousand pieces of Superfest glassware, some of which made their way into the hands of Western collectors and museums. Today, they reconsidered to be one of the most important artifacts of the Cold War era and are highly sought after by collectors. But perhaps the best place to see a sample of Superglass is at the Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin, where they're still using one of their plates every single day. If you've ever looked at a piece of glass and thought to yourself, man, this is great, but it would be so much better if it killed someone, then boy, do I have the channel for you. From broken bottles to shards of plate glass, they've got it all. So if you want to learn more about the deadliest glass in the world, definitely check them out.